Hi everyone, this is Sarah Gutierrez, and today we will be tackled about a fiction literature from Vietnam entitled The Things They Carried. And here are the chapter 1 to 6. Chapter 1: The Things They Carried. In this chapter, the narrator introduces the main characters and describes the war setting. The thoughts and action of Jimmy Cross, a lieutenant in an army unit on active combat duty in the Vietnam War, are described in third person by an unnamed narrator. Lieutenant Cross is preoccupied with Martha, a young woman he dated prior to joining the army. He thinks about letters she wrote him. He wonders if she is a virgin. He thinks about how much he loves her and wants her to love him back. The narrator lists tangible and intangible items that the soldiers carry with them, such as Lieutenant Cross' picture and the feelings of Martha. Other members of the unit are introduced through the items they carry, such as Henry Dobbins carrying extra food, Ted Lavender carrying tranquilizer pills, and Kiowa carrying a hunting hatchet. By describing the items that the soldiers carry, O'Brien introduces readers to the novel's main characters. The level of detail O'Brien provides about the character is expanded and illuminated in the following chapters, though O'Brien distills the essence of each character's personality through the symbolic items each carries. Henry Dobbins is armed with a machine gun and his girlfriend's pantyhose. Dave Jensen carries items such as soap, dental floss, foot powder, and vitamins. Michelle Sanders is carrying condoms, brass knuckles, and the radio for the unit. Norman Walker carries a diary with him. Kiowa carries a copy of the New Testament as well as moccasins. Rat Kelly carries a first aid kit, brandy, comic books, and M&M's candy. The narrator provides additional information about the certain items. For example, the poncho Ted Lavender is carrying would later be used by his fellow soldiers to carry his dead body. The device is an example of the author and narrator along with small details in the text that will be explained further later in the book. It's also worth noting how the details are selective. They are recalled by a character, the chapters and name narrator. The specific details of what each man carries are filtered through the narrator's memory. O'Brien goes into great detail about what all the men carry, including standard equipment, weapons, tear gas, explosives, ammunition, and threshing tools, starlight scopes, grenades, flak jackets, boots, ration, and the army newsletter. They also carry their grief, terror, love, and longing with dignity and poise. Obien's extensive catalog of items paint a picture in the reader's mind that gradually expands. Lieutenant Cross is singled out from the rest of the squad, and O'Brien goes in the most detail about his inner feelings and thoughts. Lieutenant Cross has an action shot of Martha playing volleyball, which many of these soldiers hump or carry. He also recalls their date and regrets not attempting to satisfy his desire to become intimate with her by tying her up and touching her knees. And that's the end of chapter 1. Let's move on to the chapter 2 called Love. Character Tim O'Brien is a middle-aged writer, recalls Lieutenant Cross visiting him at his home many years after the war. They talk and look at old photographs for an entire day, recalling both good and bad memories of war. O'Brien inquires about Martha. He is stunned when Jimmy pulls out a small frame with a photograph of Martha playing volleyball in it, because he assumed Jimmy had burned it after one of his men died. Jimmy had, but he had run into Martha at a high school reunion years later, and she eventually gave him a replacement photograph. He must have informed her that he still loved her and was intrigued as to the why she had never married and instead become a Lutheran missionary. She admitted she didn't know, but she hinted that there was a reason. Jimmy had been telling her all night about how he wanted to touch her knee. When O'Brien discovers this, he steers the conversation away from Martha. As Jimmy is leaving, O'Brien expresses an interest in writing a story about their visit. Jimmy starts to ask O'Brien not to mention something in his story, but O'Brien cuts him off and says he won't. After the conversation of Lieutenant Cross and O'Brien, let's talk about the chapter 3, called Spin. O'Brien offers a collection of related story fragments or memory snapshots in his memoirs. Michelle Saunders, he recalls, sent his body lies to his local draft board. He recalls nightly checkers game with Norman Volker and Henry Dobbins. O'Brien described what it's like to sit at his typewriter and recall these incidents from his time in Vietnam, as well as what it's like to read what he's written. He remembers both the bad and the great memories, such as the old Vietnamese man who led his unit through a dangerous quagmire. O'Brien sustained on his memories through the lens of a writer. His daughter asked the question when he writes about Vietnam. These stories and fragments stay with him and bring his past into the present. Finally, he suggests that the stories will continue to exist even if recollection of what actually occurred are erased. And then the chapter 4 is On the Rainy Day, where the writer narrates his story. Middle-aged writer O'Brien tells a story about himself that he has never told anyone before, in an attempt to relieve some of his shame and guilt about his involvement in war. O'Brien's story takes place in the summer of 1968, when he was 21-year-old, was drafted into the army. Before his draft notice arrived, O'Brien had taken a low-key anti-war stance by campaigning. He recalls his feelings upon receiving a draft notice, believing that he was unsuitable for military service due to his academic achievements and graduate school prospects. O'Brien informs his father that his summer plans are to wait and work. He works at a pig slaughterhouse and meat packing plant during the summer. The work is sloppy and unpleasant, and O'Brien senses the end of his life. Around the middle of July, O'Brien considered crossing the border into Canada to avoid the draft. He considered the morality of his decision because he is concerned about losing respectability, being ridiculed, and being caught by authorities. While working in the slaughterhouse, O'Brien develops a strong desire to visit Canada. He leaves work and north along the Rainy River, which serves as the natural border between United States and Canada. Exhausted and terrified, Obian pulls over to a shabby old fishing resort on U.S. side of the border. Elroy Belda, the elderly owner, rents him a cabin. Elroy does not inquire about O'Brien plans, despite the fact that they are most likely fairly obvious. O'Brien nerves, fear, and above all, shame fleeing to Canada remain. But he joins a lord in chores about the lodge to distract himself from his troubles. When calculating O'Brien's bill, Elroy recalls the chores O'Brien had completed. Decides he owes O'Brien's money and gives him $200. O'Brien refuses the money despite the fact that he would require it if he continued on Canada. Elroy, on the other hand, tacks it to the O'Brien's cabin door with a note labeled Emergency Fund. Elroy takes O'Brien fishing on the river on his last day at lodge. The narrator, O'Brien, comments on the thoughts and pass through his mind. He recalls carrying and feeling helpless while Elroy continues to fish and pretends not to notice. O'Brien tries to force himself out of the boat and toward the Canadian shore, but he is unable to force himself to flee. And for my last chapter, it is entitled Enemies and Friends. Lee Strunk and Dave Jensen fight on patrol over Jensen's missing jackknife, which he believes Strunk stole. Jensen easily overpowers Strunk, repeatedly hitting him and breaking his nose. As a result, Jensen begins to worry. Concerned about the retaliation Strunk may exact on him, he keeps an eye on Strunk, paying attention to his whereabouts and being wary of him where Strunk deals with weapons. Jensen's anxiety grows and he becomes increasingly tense until he snaps and begins, firing his weapon into the air while yelling Strunk's name. Jensen borrows a pistol later that night uses to break his own noise. He shows Strunk what he has done and asks if they're even now. Strunk says yes. Strunk can stop laughing the next morning because he stole the jackknife. Jensen and Strunk begin to pair up and ambushes and cover each other on patrol over the next month. They gradually develop their friendship and trust. They make a pact that if either of them is seriously injured, the other will kill him. They both sign the contract. Strunk is severely injured a few months later when he steps on the ridge mortar round. The explosion severs his right leg below the knee. Strunk is being treated by a medic and is being prepared for evacuation. Jensen's approach just Strunk before evacuating him, and when Strunk opens his eyes and sees Jensen, he begs him not to kill him. Jensen tries to be encouraging and swears not to carry out the agreement and kills Strunk. Strunk is evacuated by helicopter, but the unit later learns that he died in the process. O'Brien believes this news relieved Jensen of a heavy burden. And now, after knowing the chapter 1 to 6, here is the chapter 7 and so on that will be tackled with Mr. Roy Carpio.
In this chapter, How to Tell a True War Story, of the things they carried, O'Brien offers a story about Rat Kiley, and he assures to his readers that it is true. Rat's friend, Kurt Lemon, is killed, and Rat writes Lemon's sister a letter. This letter talks about her brother and the crazy things they did together. Rat believes the letter is too personal and touching. However, from Lemon's sister's viewpoint, it is inappropriate and disturbing. The sister never writes back, and Rat was left offended and angered. O'Brien suggests that Lemon's sister's failure to return the letter offers a kind of sad and true moral to the story. Lemon's death happened because of playing a game of catch with a grenade wherein he accidentally stepped into a booby trap, exploded, and lifting him up into a tree full of moss and white blossoms. O'Brien remembers body parts strewn in the jungle trees and thinks about his own memories of the event. He, he comments that in true stories, it is difficult to distinguish what actually happened from what seemed to happen. O'Brien offers readers the advice that they should be skeptical and offers a story told to him by Mitchell Sanders as an example. A six-man patrol goes into the mountains for a week-long operation to monitor enemy movement. The jungle is spooky, and the men start hearing strange, eerie noises, which became an opera, a glee club, chanting, and so on. But the voices they hear are not human. Sanders says that the mountains, trees, and rocks were making the noise, and that the men called in massive firepower. He says a colonel later asked them why, and they do not answer because they know he will not understand their story. Sanders says that the moral is that nobody listens. The next day, Sanders admits he made up parts of the story. Next, O'Brien tells what follows the Lemon's death. The unit comes across a baby water buffalo. Rat Kylie tries to feed it, but it does not eat. So Kylie steps back and shoots the animal in its knee. Though crying, he continues to shoot the buffalo, aiming to hurt rather than kill it. Others dump the near dead buffalo in a water or in a well rather to kill it. O'Brien concludes that a true war story, like the one about the water buffalo, is never about war. These stories are about love, memory, and sorrow. For this short chapter, The Dentist, of the things they carried, O'Brien remembers that when Kurt Lemon died, he found it difficult to mourn, as he did not know him well. He remembers Lemon's tendency to play the cliché role of the tough soldier, deliberately taking unnecessary risks and bragging and embellishing them with untruths. O'Brien offers this story as a means for guarding against sentimentality over the dead. The unit of soldiers had been in an area that was relatively quiet, with no direct combat with the enemy and no casualties. An army dentist visits the area to administer care to the unit. Though the dentist has only regimentary facilities, Lemon is especially scared because of childhood experiences with dentists. He faints in the dentist's tent before being examined. Others in the unit know about this because they help him on a cot after the episode. Lemon keeps to himself but cannot let what happened go unanswered. He complains about a toothache and has the dentist pull a tooth without finding a problem with it, which pleases him and helps him recover from his embarrassment. In this long chapter, Sweetheart of Song Trabong, of the things they carried, O'Brien recalls a story of Rat Kylie's. Though Rat swears the story is true, O'Brien doubts its accuracy. He explains that Rat exaggerates not because he wants to deceive, but because he wants listeners to almost feel the story so that it seems more real. Rat had been assigned to a medical detachment near Song Trabong in an area the medics shared with 6 Green Berets. The groups did not interact often. During an all-night drinking session, a medic jokingly mentions that the medics should pool their money and import some prostitutes from Saigon. One medic, Mark Fossey, is taken by the idea, and 6 weeks later, his high school sweetheart, Mary Ann Bell, arrives at the compound. Young and naive, Mary Ann insists on learning about Vietnamese culture and the Vietnam War up close. She assists when the medical unit receives casualties. Eventually, she stops wearing makeup and her attention is consumed by learning how to use an M16 assault rifle. Fossey suggests that she return home, but she does not. She begins staying out late, finally, staying out all night. Fossey, realizing Mary Ann is missing, wakes up Rat. They search for her but do not find her. O'Brien interrupts the story to comment on how Rat told the story. Rat would stop with Mary Ann's disappearance and ask where she might be. Mitchell Sanders guesses that she was with the Green Berets because Rat mentioned them, and that is how stories work. Rat would, as, Rat would resume the story and tell his listeners that she was resting with the Green Berets in their hooch after an all-night ambush. The next morning, Mary Ann returns wearing green fatigues and carrying a rifle. She tells Fossey that they will talk later. But he is angry and will not wait. Later that day, Mary Ann appears fully groomed, wearing her feminine clothes. Fossey explains that they officially became engaged, and the pair maintains a facade of happiness. Fossey makes arrangements for Mary Ann's trip home. The next morning, she disappears again with the Green Berets. 3 weeks pass until she returns. The next day, Fossey waits outside the Green Berets area, waiting to see Mary Ann. He hears an eerie human voice. Pushing inside the Green Berets' hooch, he sees piles of bones, smells a horrendous stench, and hears Mary Ann chanting. She tells Fossey that she likes this life and that he does not belong there. Rat's platoon buddies dislike the abrupt ending and ask what happened to Mary Ann. He tells them that the rest is hearsay, but that he understands that she disappeared into the jungle. In this chapter, Stockings, of the things they carried, O'Brien recalls a fellow soldier, Henry Dobbins, and his habit of wrapping his girlfriend's pantyhose around his neck as a sort of talisman or lucky charm. O'Brien remembers Dobbins as a simple man with good intentions. When caught in a fight in the middle of an open field, Dobbins wrapped the pantyhose around his face and made it through the fight unscathed. The pantyhose, he believed, kept him safe, and he continued his eccentric practice even if, after his girlfriend broke up with him because he said the magic did not go away. In this chapter, Church, of the things they carried, one afternoon, the unit comes across a pagoda where two monks who speak little English live in a shack. One monk leads the men into the rundown pagoda where they spend the night and set up a base of operations. The monks take pride in offering the men small items like a chair and watermelons. The monks especially like Henry Dobbins and learn to help him clean his machine gun. Dobbin tells Kiowa that he might join up with these monks after the war. He explains that he is not interested in the scholarly aspects of religion, but he would enjoy being nice to people. Kiowa says that he would not want to be a minister, but that he likes church, and he repeats that he feels wrong about setting up camp in the pagoda. In this chapter, The Man I Killed, of the things they carried, O'Brien describes a Viet Cong soldier whom he has killed, using exact and precise physical detail, including descriptions of his wounds. Then O'Brien imagines the life story of this man and imagines that he was a scholar who felt an obligation to defend his village. Azar comments to O'Brien about the dead soldier and is sent away by Kiowa, who senses that O'Brien is upset. Kiowa tells O'Brien to stop staring at the body and offers justifications for what has happened. O'Brien continues to imagine that the man he killed was devoted to his studies, that he wrote poems, and that he fell in love with his classmate. O'Brien sees that the man's fingernails and hair are clean and guesses that he has been a soldier for only one day. Later, Kiowa tells O'Brien that he is looking better. Even later, he tells O'Brien that he should talk about it, and again tries to get the disturbed O'Brien to talk. O'Brien's daughter, Kathleen, asked him when she was 9 years old if he had ever killed anyone. He told her no, but hopes that she will ask again as an adult. Again, O'Brien describes the Viet Cong soldier and tells how he saw him approach through the morning fog. He recalls being terrified and that his action was automatic, not political and not personal. He believes too that if he had not thrown the grenade, the Vietnamese soldier would have passed by without incident.
The story started when Kathleen asked her dad if he had ever killed someone, considering that he was a soldier and that he writes mostly about war. Tim, during that time, decided to say no to his daughter, about our question if he have ever killed a man. Until a flashback surged in on his mind. It was years ago, during the time of war in Vietnam, in the place of Mai Ke. When he and Kyowa and their team are observing the place, taking turns to take some sleep while observing inside. Until Kyowa woke up Tim for final observation since the dawn is breaking. Tim then prepared 3 grenades and put over on his position to observe. Until a young man appeared on the foggy side. And as Tim was nervous and unable to clearly think before throwing the grenade at the young man who was just passing by. As what he thinks about until now, he died. It was still a great regret and pain for Tim, as he was blaming himself, thinking that if he just let the man pass by, he may still be alive today. But then there was also a part in him that says that it was a war, the soldier's instinct that pushed him to do it, and up until now, he can still forget that certain moment in his life because he was full of regret for his actions. There are times in our life that we are being covered and consumed by fear, that we are being impulsive in the decisions we are making, that later on turned out to be our greatest regret in life. There was this girl who danced outside the house who was burned by the gunships, in where her family was there. Despite of the situation, the soldiers, more specifically Azar, found that action strange, to dance after knowing that your family died because of fire. But Henry Dobbin told him instead that the girl maybe just really left the den. But mockingly, Azar imitated the movement of the girl, swaying his hips and making a turn. Until Dobbin caught him and threatened him that he will throw him on the well if he didn't stop. For Dobbin, he did that to give a certain amount of respect for the girl even if he was one of the reasons for her pain. During a tragic event in our life, there are really times in where we are pushing so hard to ease it by doing something that will ease our pain. And the girl maybe did that dance to allow herself to be free for a moment from her reality. Or maybe that was a gesture she wants to be conveyed by the persons around her. Maybe she was trying to send a message by using her body movements. But then the soldiers won't understand it, simply because they are not in pain. Norman Booker roams around the lake as he have nowhere to go after the war. Using his father's Chevrolet, he drives around the lake and reminisces all the memories he had made there during his high school years. He remembered Sally Kramer, who used to be his girlfriend but now married. remembering how they would drive around to talk about random things they can share to one another. He even went to her place unconsciously. He saw her, still looking so beautiful, and he looks happier, and without uttering a single word, he drove away from her. Then he also remembered his friend, Max Arnold, who is now dead. And then his father, that someone who is so much proud of him and to all his achievements, specifically to all the 7 medals he already brought home, a sign of his bravery. At the time, he was thinking about the supposed to be 8th medal, which is the Silver Star, but he unfortunately didn't have the luck to win it over. But he still thinks that he made enough to make his father proud. He remembered that time when their camp was stalled in a sewage field, so when it rained, they felt the sticky feeling going in their clothes and boots, and add to it the devastating smell around them that was caused by the sewage around them. That was a very strange experience they had during. His routine continued for days to be just like that. He will ride his father's car and he will roam around their place, go to lake and observe all the people gathering in the place, and he will just instantly feel the loneliness within him because he have no one to share his thoughts with, because he have no one on his side. One day, while doing his usual routine in the lake, Broker had this thought within himself. The image of his father popped up on him, and he realized how he will try to console him and how he will make him feel so proud, and that made him smile. By then, with his clothes, he submerged himself in the lake as he lay set to watch the beautiful fireworks. There are still something good in my place, he thought. Notes is about the experiences of Norman Boker, which was written in a 17-page paper that was sent to Tim, wanting to share his war experience and his life after that. Norman Boker, as written in the letter, told that his life seems meaningless. He tried to study and to work to continue his life, but he couldn't find reason to stay committed to those that he ends up quitting. He narrated his experiences to Tim, how hard his life was after the which made Tim reflect on his own, on how he continues his study and life, unlike the Boker. They have the same experience but not the same capacity to accept the circumstances. Tim was supposed to publish another novel that will be entitled Going After Kakyato, but then he remembered Broken's letter and that pushed him to write a story about it. But he omitted the greatest turn point of the letter, which was about the sewage filled in rain and Kyowa's death, just to be in favor of his protagonist's. When Tim finished writing the story, he sent a copy to Broken. After reading the story, Broken felt disappointed as he think and felt that Tim didn't respect his experience and Kyowa's death during the war. 8 months later, after Broken received the message from O'Brien, he killed himself in a water tank using a jump rope he was using in the park before his death. After a tragic encounter with the nature at night, next morning they immediately looked for Kiowa, as he was one of the soldiers who died. Lieutenant Cross, together with his men, continued to look for Kiowa's body that was, they assumed, being drenched in the mud. Along the process, broke the silence by making a joke about how Kiowa died, but then Norman Booker told him to stop. Later on, Sanders and Booker eventually found the rucksack of Kiowa. They are still debating who is to blame for Kiowa's death. Sanders put the blame to Lieutenant Cross as he thought that he is not capable and trustworthy enough to check the location before letting them set up there. But Sanders told him that the lieutenant is not someone they should blame for it. On the other hand, Lieutenant Cross, with his pain for losing a friend, keeps on thinking how he would send a message to Kiowa's father about his death. He was also blaming himself for what happened. A sob interrupted Cross' moment as young soldier came into him telling him that he may be the reason for Kiowa's death, thinking that if he doesn't accidentally signal their presence to the enemy, this won't lead to Kiowa's death. And that young soldier was also looking for his girlfriend's photo, as it was the last memory he had from her. Norman Booker locates the corpse of Kiowa. It took them a lot of time and energy before they finally be able to dislodge the body from the muddy bottom of the field. And upon lifting the body of Kiowa from the mud, they cleaned him up and collect all his belongings from his pocket and tape it on his wrist. They radioed the chopper to come right away. Lieutenant Cross then tried to revise his letter for Kiowa's father, but then the guilt was eating him up during that time, and he still chose to drown himself to the thought that it was his fault.
Good form. O'Brien talks about the big difference between actual truth and story truth. He wants to explain the structure of his book. He saw a man die on a trail near Mike, but that he did not kill him. He says that he made up his story. He wants to feel what he felt, and because of that, story truth is truer than happening truth. That what stories can do is make things present. On the other hand, Kathleen doubted, asking him if he's ever killed anyone. And he don't know what he can say, if it is yes or no. Field trip. O'Brien says that a few moments after finishing the story in the field, he returns to the Vietnam site of Kiowa's death. With his daughter Kathleen and an interpreter, he says though the field does look familiar, it is not how he remembered it. Everything he says is dry. Nevertheless, Kathleen complains the land stinks. She has just turned 10 and has received the trip as birthday gift intended to grant her insight into her father's history. But though she attempts to act tolerant, she is bored. She can't understand the war or why her father fought in. Kathleen and O'Brien approach the field. Kathleen is amused by interpreter's display of magic tricks. He reflects on the way the field, which now looks so different, could have the power to swallow his best friend and part of his life. He goes for a quick swim, surprising and disgusting Kathleen, who threatens to tell her mother. But before he leaves the river, he takes Kiowa's moccasins and leaves them in the spot where he imagined his friend settled into the river. When O'Brien returns, Kathleen asks him if an old man in the field is mad at him. His hunger is done. The Ghost Soldier. O'Brien recalls that he was shot twice, the first time image from Gene Autry movies raced through his head and he ends up on the lap of Rat Kelly, the medic. During and after his treatment, O'Brien appreciates Kelly's skills, courage, and ease when O'Brien returns from his recovery almost a month later. Kelly has been wounded and shipped off. A new medic named Bobby Jorgensen has taken his place. When O'Brien is shot the second time, Jorgensen is incapable of treating his shock and result is a painful experience for O'Brien. O'Brien was frightened to revenge and he vows to himself he take his time to the hospital. However, he forced himself to sleep though his stomach because of his backside hurts. After his recovering, he meets and listens to stories from his friends, especially one about a soldier who decided to go for a swim and ended up with a disease that was later treated by Jorgensen, but he is most concerned with finding Jorgensen. Furthermore, Saunders encouraged O'Brien to leave Jorgensen alone, saying that he is one of the Alpha Company now and implying that O'Brien is no longer a member of company. Until next morning, O'Brien runs into Jorgensen, who apologized for his treatment, saying that he is scared and that since O'Brien was shot, he has felt a great deal of remorse. O'Brien begins resenting Jorgensen for making him feel guilty. O'Brien attempts to enlist his friend into his plans for revenge, but the only one who will concede to get involved is Azar. The two go to spook Jorgensen as he serves all-night duty. O'Brien says the amount of fear one feels multiples as one sides alone. Wondering and worrying, he identifies the Jorgensen and feels his fear later. With the Jorgensen, they set players and when Jorgensen veers from his position and rolls toward a heap of sandbags, O'Brien finally feels vindicated. He tells to Azar that he had enough. But Azar, who loves to make trouble, wants to finish what they started. He flashbacks of being shot, thinks about being in shock, and once again resent Jorgensen's deficiencies. He followed through. Azar and O'Brien set Opler and make a wild sandbag move to spook Jorgensen further. But Jorgensen does not lose his cool. Instead, he advanced toward. Azar kicks O'Brien's head, declares him pathetic, and goes up to bed. He later reconciles with O'Brien. The two men shake hands and Jorgensen compliments O'Brien's dramatic touch and asks him if they're even now. The two jokingly decide to scare Azar. Nightlife. O'Brien isn't there when Rat Kelly sustained the injury that gets him sent to Japan. Michelle Saunders relayed the story later. When the platoon is in the foothills west of Kwaing Nagay City, they receive word of possible danger, so they sleep all day and march all night. The tension affects the men in different ways. Jensen takes vitamins, Cross takes no dose, and Kelly simply retreats into himself. For 6 days, he says nothing and then he can stop talking. He begins scratching himself constantly and complaining of the bungs. It is sad. Saunders later remembers and strange, but everyone feels the effect of the operation. They are chasing ghosts. One afternoon, Kelly almost breaks down, confessing to Saunders that he doesn't think he is cut to be a medic, always picking up parts and plugging up holes. He mentioned Ted Lavender and Kurt Lemon, includes that they could be so alive one moment and the dead the next. He says that he is haunted by image of body parts, though especially at night. He sees his own body and he imagines bugs chewing through him. The next morning, he shoots himself in the log of injury large enough to earn his release from duty. No one blames him, and Cross, the biggest critic of Killy's cowardice, says that he will touch for him. The Lives of the Dead. O'Brien has been at war for only 4 days when the platoon is fired on by a village near the South China Sea. Cross order an airstrike and the platoon watches the village burn. Dave Jensen pokes fun at a dead old man whose right arm has been owned off and encourage O'Brien to do the same to show a little respect for young elders. O'Brien refuses and Kiowas tells him he's done the right thing. He asks if the old man was O'Brien's first experience with a dead body, and O'Brien says no, thinking of his first date Linda. During 1956, O'Brien was in love with a 9-year-old Linda, his beautiful, fragile schoolmate who had taken to wearing a red cap everywhere. He's arranged for his parents to take him and Linda to the movies to see The Man Who Never Was, a World War II film that contained an image of a corpse falling into the sea. When the movie was over and the two couples had made a stop at Dairy Queen, they dropped Linda off, and the fourth grade O'Brien knew then that he was in love. Linda continued to wear her red cap every day, despite being hunted for it. One day, a fellow classmate, Nick Vinhope, pulled off the cap, revealing Linda's slowly balding head. Linda said nothing. O'Brien later explains that Linda had a brain tumor and soon died. He had known she was sick, but Nick was the one to break the news, saying O'Brien's girlfriend sick, but Nick was the one to break the news, saying O'Brien's girlfriend had locked the bucket. O'Brien went to see funeral home with his father and marveled at how strange and real it was to see Linda's body in a casket. He stared for a while, saying nothing until his father, unfavorable to address the situation, proposed a trip to the ice cream store. Later, O'Brien became withdrawn and obsessed with falling asleep. In daydreams and night dreams, Linda comforted O'Brien, telling him it didn't matter that she was dead. O'Brien says that in Vietnam, the soldiers devise ways to make the dead seem less dead. They keep them alive with stones, such as the stories of Ted Lavender, Tradili's use or Kurt Lemon trick or threatening. O'Brien remembered that he saw Linda's body in the funeral home, but that it upset him because it didn't seem real. He says that he picked Kurt Lemon out of a tree and watched Kiowa sink into the muck of the song Trabong, but that he still dreamed Linda alive in the story and in dreams. In his dreams, when he was young, Linda waited for him and stayed alive. If just something obscured by other things happening. In stories, O'Brien concludes that dead, alive. The end.